All right. Good evening, everyone. Darren Adair with American Hospitality Consulting. Welcome to Great Minds Session 8, Rebuilding Our Industry's Reputation. I appreciate everybody being here. Thank you so much for taking the time. I know it was a long weekend back home, so today was probably a busy day. And, we got lots of things opening up down here in the U.S., so everybody's got lots going on. So I appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. So today's session, like I said, is being recorded. It is August the 3rd, 2021. So today we're going to be focusing on a topic that could spark some debate, could spark some really good discussion, but it's talking about the reputation of our industry, some of the hits it's taken lately, and what can we do to address that? And how can we start to move forward and really making some changes and to impact some of the challenges that most of us are facing right now? I'm very happy to have joining me this evening somebody that I think many of you will probably know. And let's get my screen to work. We have got Jim Taylor, the owner of Taylor Co. and the creator of Benchmark 60, joining us this evening. Before going into business for himself, Jim had a long and successful career with Cactus Club Cafe restaurants. I know I spent a fair share of dollars in the Saskatoon one myself. Operating in multiple roles in several markets, Jim was able to take a lead role in both the growth and financial strategies that helped make Cactus Restaurants a household name in Canada. As I said before, he's a creator of Benchmark 60, one-of-a-kind premier restaurant financial optimization platform designed for restaurants to dramatically increase their profit margins by understanding data, implementing benchmarks, and using metrics to improve productivity. So Jim is the perfect person to have joining us this evening and talking about this because his experience and the things that he's created, I know can be of a great resource to all of us tonight. So Jim, thank you so much for joining us this evening. I appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks for having me. It's quite the script there. Thanks for the intro.
Hey, I'm going to get my screen share to stop and we'll continue on. So, as I said, there's a lot of things that we could probably go to, and there's probably one real simple thing, and you and I both think we're going to get there pretty quickly, and it's the dollars and cents of everything. But, what I wanted to start off with is what do you think is the greatest threat or challenge that we're facing right now? And what are you things you're hearing from your clients when they come to you that, really needs to be focused on?
Well, the biggest thing that, and you and I talked a little bit about this earlier, but the biggest thing that I hear from every restaurant group, every restaurateur, every owner that I hear from is we don't have enough people. And, I think that's obviously why we're here today, to talk a little bit about that reputation thing, but it's definitely it's a glaring issue in the industry right now. And, I think we're going to have some good discussion today, trying to hopefully come up with some ideas and good debate around how to get through that. Because it's scary what's happening in the industry right now. It's, I find that it's making restaurateurs make decisions they never would have made before.
Yeah,
Definitely.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, guys, as we're going through this, if questions do pop up as we're talking, please feel free to share them in the chat function. I will then call you in and have you ask your question out loud because, like we said, we're pretty sure there's going to be a lot of discussion on this. But, and we've talked a lot about recruiting, but we've talked about things to do to recruit, but we haven't talked a lot about the ways to change some of the narrative that's out there, because the media has talked a lot about negatively about our industry and how it treats its people and all the different things. So we've talked about this. I don't think there's one key item that we need to focus on. It's a collection of things. Because if you focus all your attention in one area, you're probably not going to get the results you're looking for. And, you touched on that a little bit. So, what do you think we really need to change, or what direction would you point somebody in to make changes to say, we need to start looking at things this way? Because as you and I talked about earlier, I'm seeing a lot of people who are doing exactly what they were doing before this all started. And I don't think you're not going to be getting the same results. And we were struggling before this all started.
Yeah. Well, you and I were talking about the amazing stat earlier around, 30% less people working in hospitality now than when we were in 2019. And we were already short then, but I think it's somewhere between reputation of the industry and education around how the industry operates, and the other thing we were talking about earlier that you made the comment on is that everybody's doing referral bonuses or signing bonuses right now, or retention bonus, one way or another. It's a bonus of some sort. Right. And the thing that actually it frightens me a little bit is that it seems like one person starts it on a street or on a block or in a market, and then within a few weeks, everybody's doing the exact same thing. And, I think the opportunity and one of the threats that exists in our industry right now is that there's constantly innovation happening when it comes to product, when it comes to food and beverage, when it comes to location sourcing and what the room looks like, or, all of those things, service, all those types of things. There's innovation all the time. And there's this lack. Our industry is behind when it comes to innovation in terms of business and how the business operates. And tech is just starting to get there when it comes to restaurants. But that's a threat for me that I see in our industry.
Yeah, and I agree with you on the tech, and we've talked a bit about that before. I'm a big supporter of the utilization of technology to help to not only find your people, train your people, but to perform tasks so that you can spend the time out dealing with your guests as opposed to stuck in the office or trying to catch up on those things. So a lot of great tools, but why don't we talk a little bit more about that? As we talk about technology, and there's a lot of differences between Canada and the US that I have seen. We're just getting into, and I've talked about this before, the utilization of ordering at the table and paying at the table. But are there any key things that you have seen that you think are an innovation that really needs that we should be looking at to help address with this reputation change? What are some of the things that you're seeing out there?
Well, so much of the reputation of our industry comes from working conditions in general, and whether that's hours or compensation or environment. And, to be totally honest, I don't know if how exactly tech can play into that. But to me, that's where so much of the reputation of our industry comes from, and even right. I think I'll say this, people our age or in our generation of hospitality, we approached it from a pay your dues, work hard. I remember working open to close. My requested shift on Saturdays was open to close because I knew that I could make enough money to pay my rent if I worked those longer shifts, because it was about making good money, right? But I think that was, and even in the culinary world, it was a lot around pay. It's a lot around pay your dues and work your way up. And I think that's a lot of what needs to change, because working your way up and even into a lot of restaurant groups into management doesn't necessarily mean better lifestyle, better income. Sometimes it's a pay cut. And so I don't know if that's a little off topic, I guess, from the tech side of things, but it's, there's a lot that plays into that reputation side of things.
No, and I think that was a good way to go. I mean, for me, the tech is giving an owner or a manager the opportunity to be on the floor, working with their teams and supporting their teams so they're not away from the business. So, and there's some other things that I'll ask you about in a little bit, some things that I've heard that might help out. But, just with the reputation and the different things that you've mentioned this before in some conversations we've had, I've heard for years the whole work-life balance piece. Right? We have all heard about work-life balance. You changed that to life-work balance in one of our conversations. What does that difference mean, and how would that look, or how do you think that would look in our industry?
Well, to me, I think I mentioned this a few minutes ago about part of it's about reputation and part of it's about education. And I see every day with restaurateurs that I talk to about the opportunity for them to look at the business differently. And that's where that life work thing, I think, comes into play a little bit more. It's based around decision making and how they make their decisions about how to operate the business. Right. The example that I used with you when we had a quick chat earlier today was speaking to a restaurateur the other day who because he doesn't know any differently, I shouldn't say doesn't know better, but because he's sort of taking that the way we've always done it is the way we always will approach. He's now closed on Mondays, and he's now closed from 2 to 4 every day of the week because he's got not enough staff, and the only solution he can come up with based on what's happening in his market is to start closing. And so, I think there's opportunity in our industry to help operators make better decisions around what the business needs or what opportunities or options are available, and then they can work on that life-work balance for them and for their staff. And I can appreciate what he's trying to do with the closing at 2 to 4 thing, because it's really to give the kitchen a break, right? To give them a couple hours to recoup. But it gets scary when it's forcing operators to make decisions like that.
And I've seen that in a lot of markets. I was in Branson, Missouri a couple of weeks ago, big tourist area, and they were closed. Every business was closed at 9 p.m. right? And some of the hotels weren't doing rooms, making up rooms on a daily basis because they didn't have the staff.
Yeah.
Like, it's unfortunate that they're having to make those decisions, but they're doing that because it's the best that they can do to get through and still be there for the guest as much as possible. And it was packed. I mean, the traffic in downtown there was absolutely insane. So, something that was brought up on a previous call, and I've seen some articles about it that's happening in Europe a little bit more. But what are your thoughts on a 4-day work week for the leadership teams in our business? Do you think the 4-day work week has an opportunity in the hospitality industry?
Well, I know that this one could be a bit of a controversial discussion and can go either, on one hand, if you go too far, you become a labor lobbyist. If you go too far the other way, you become, the enemy of the people because you're, against it. But I've actually done a lot of research and have quite a bit of experience in working through some of those models. And the one that was the most interesting was actually a 4.5-day work week. Okay. And it was interesting because when it first got started, when we first started looking at this model, it started out as a life work balance concept, right? Give people more time, because the generation that's running our industry right now, they don't want as much money. They want time, right? They want to travel and they want to do different things, and when they can travel again. But
right,
the real big difference that we saw was it actually became more of a performance management metric and a morale booster than it was anything about the number of hours that people were working.
Right.
And the interesting thing about that was the way that model worked was that on your half day, on your flex day, or whatever you want to call that, it was always on the person's last day of their work week, and they could do whatever they wanted with the second half of their shift. And the only rule, in order to control it a little bit, was they weren't allowed to be in the business. So if they needed to catch up on some work or different things, they could go to a coffee shop, or they could go home and do some work, or they could go and take off early for a long weekend. They could go meet their family for dinner, or they could do whatever they want, go and, sit on a patio. It didn't really matter. But the performance management metric side of it came really into play when we started to notice that the top performing people actually were more organized, took better advantage of the time, and got better because they also felt more rested when they needed to. And the bottom performing people viewed it as though they worked less. And so they actually became less productive, got less done, and it became a metric around performance management. So it was really, really interesting. And I'm actually a huge believer in whether it's 4-day work week or 4.5-day work week or whatever that looks like. I think top performing people are going to perform well no matter what. They just won't be as tired.
Definitely. Good point. Just a reminder, guys, if you've got something you'd like to share, if you've got a question for Jim on this topic or myself, please feel free to throw something into the chat box. I'll be more than happy to bring you in. Anton, just saying, tough conversation for our industry. Anton, why don't you, if you want to unmute yourself and why do you think this is a tough conversation, and how would you approach this?
Well, I think the specific one on the 4-day work week, because most of the restaurants don't even work that way. It's not a Monday to Friday job. So it's really depends on how you're scheduled. That's why I'm kind of saying it's a tough conversation, that specific one for our industry, because we don't have the set kind of scheduled days to show the performance. Like you're really, your metric is, reviews on Google and the amount of money you make. It's not necessarily, how much you work or how much you can accomplish in those kind of hours.
And I understand that, and it is a completely different way. I mean, when you think about, like I'm one of those guys that did the 13 weeks straight, 12, 14 hours a day, right? That's what we grew up in. That's what we were trained that we were supposed to do. And we know that that's not there anymore. The reason I brought it up is it actually came to me from somebody who is in the restaurant industry. It's a company, Dave's Hot Chicken. I don't know if anybody know who they are, but they're in California, they're in Texas, and they've actually started doing this for their leadership team and have found that their retention has gone up. Their management team is happier and they're actually finding people a lot easier. So, I think that's one of the things I really wanted to get about. And Anton, I appreciate you sharing, because these are discussions that we really need to start having, because doing things the way we've always done is not going to get us to where we need to be. We need to start finding some different ways, because business has changed, market has changed, the employees have changed. So we need to be a little bit more uncomfortable with being more comfortable being uncomfortable with some of the changes we need to make. Another thing that I wanted to ask you about, Jim, and I'd love to hear other people's opinion on this. I'm starting to hear more and more about instant pay or same day pay, where an employee could come in, work a shift, and at the end of that shift, get a portion of what they've earned for that day.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that? Have you heard anything about that?
I've heard about it, and I was actually speaking to a restaurant group in the Southeast United States the other day that has started doing that, and their people seem to like it. The one that I have experience with is actually it's actually their gratuities today. It's not on their paycheck pay. Okay. Yeah, there's a few of those programs that are starting to come out, which operate sort of like a preloaded credit card or debit card. And I think there's a lot of reluctancy from staff around that type of thing, because they're nervous about the government finding out about their gratuities, or what their actual income looks like. But I think the level of support around helping people have better cash flow there's probably a good opportunity around that. Right. I think it would really depend, in my experience, and you would know better than I would on this one, but in my experience in the US market, based on what some of the minimum wages are for front of house people, it may not be that much of a draw, but for back of house people, I would assume that it might be a little bit more, just based on, how much more they make in an hourly wage.
Right.
But, I think things like you were saying earlier around tech that'll help the management free up more time to be available for operations and people and those types of things. I think anything that we can do along those lines will help the industry catch up with the rest of the world, because when it comes to business management and technology, the restaurant industry is a long ways behind.
Yeah, and there's definitely some opportunities. When I first heard about that, I guess my thoughts went to some flashbacks I was having, where you'd get those phone calls last minute. Hey, I can't come to work today because I don't have bus fare, or I can't come to work today because I don't have gas for my car. And now you're scrambling to go pick people up and bring them in, so you have staff to work your shifts. That kind of addresses that issue. So again, just for sure, it's something that I never would have thought of until I heard about it, and it's like, okay, maybe there's some opportunity there. I think it's time to open the can of worms, as we're talking a little bit about money. And one of the big things we hear a lot in the media is this livable wage, and how this hospitality industry does not pay its people properly. And I think in some cases it's got some restaurant owners who are just trying to throw money at wage and all that, without focusing on some of the other stuff we've talked about. And it really needs to be more of a balanced approach. You can't just throw money at something and expect that it's going to be taken care of. You're just going to lose more money. So yeah, what are your thoughts? What are your recommendations around that?
Well, again, got to be careful you don't become the labor lobbyist or the other side
just
of it.
Setting you up, aren't I?
But yeah.
Sorry, Jim.
I think I've said this to you before, and there might be a few other people on the call that I've said this to. A big part of my belief is about and I think you're the same, is about trying to find ways to make our industry more sustainable for the next generation of restaurateurs. And if we can improve it for this generation too, then that's great. So, I mean, with the risk of upsetting anyone on this call, I'm actually a believer that the hourly wage and the salary wages for management in restaurants need to dramatically increase. I actually tell almost every client that I work with that they need to pay all of their people more. However, I think that where I say that there's an opportunity, I think from an education and innovation perspective in the industry, is that there's ways to do that responsibly, and there's ways to do that that will help the business be more sustainable long-term financially, and actually help it grow, I think our industry lacks some of the measurements that other industries don't when it comes to really being able to put ROI on that. What does the turnover actually cost in a restaurant? If
Right.
someone could actually figure that out for their business and knew exactly what it cost them every time someone left, they probably could easily be convinced to pay that person a few dollars more.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I think,
Yeah.
that's where some of the opportunity lies, but I'm a believer that we should pay everybody in the industry more. I don't know where you stand on that one, but that's my personal opinion.
I believe that there is some opportunity around that for sure to pay people a little bit.
100%.
I was waiting for you to jump in, Chef, because I could see you smiling and nodding your head. I knew you were going to jump in.
Listen, guys, I'm just sitting here biting my tongue, but it's your show.
Go ahead.
Pay people, train people, invest in people. Period. Hospitality hasn't changed since before Christ was a cowboy. And I literally mean it. It hasn't changed. The reason why we have hospitality is because we love what we do. We love bringing people in. We love feeding them. We love having them into our home. We love being hospitable. We love entertaining, all of these things. None of that has changed. Technology will never change those things. It'll never change that part of our social fabric. It'll never change our culture. And it's exactly the same in every single country on this planet, period.
Yep.
Pay people more? Yes. You can't have people having to work 3 jobs because they're never going to be focused on your job. And
right.
in the spirit of not taking up too much of your guys' time here, training. And when I say training, I mean training by invest in your new people, have interesting and have educational onboarding practices. Organizations, and this comes from the National Restaurant Association, and I tell this to all of my classes, I tell this in all of my speeches. 86% of people asked said they would stay and that they would be more interested and more invested if they felt that the company was interested in them and making sure they were well educated in their job and they had the tools to do it better. That is the problem with our industry, period.
100%. I agree with you, Chef. And we've talked about this before. You and I have talked about this, Jim. You and I talked about this. It's that, we need to look at more than that. We need to look at how are we onboarding? How are we supporting? How are we training? Are we setting these people up to succeed? Gone are the days, oh, you've been a server before. Here, go take orders, right? Yeah. Which we are guilty of in this industry. We need to do more to set these people up, create that proper culture and make sure that they are taken care of. Now, yeah. Nick Walters, you put something in there. If you would like to unmute yourself and just talk a little bit more about, you said culture / environment plus decent pay equals retention and referral from current employees. So if you want to just kind of add a little bit more to that, that'd be great.
Sure. Yeah, I could add just a little bit. So I talk to owners, GMs, and everything throughout the day in my line of work. And one of the things that I've found with the GMs and the restaurants that have been the most successful is if you're able to create a culture where people can grow or people can succeed, or where it seems like the GM or the owners have investment in like the lower tier employees, not only is like hiring less of an issue, but the retention level for those employees that are coming in is just astronomical. We find that with the people that we do work with, I mainly work with like Firehouse Subs and Jersey Mike's clients, but the people who are most successful are the ones who are just constantly, like I talked to somebody today who said that they're working like with a 17-year-old kid, and they're just so excited to see how that person grows with the company, and they're so invested. And talking with that 17-year-old kid and then the people who worked in that store, it's like their issues in terms of hiring are a lot less than those other ones who just see their employees as people who are working for them instead of people who are working with them. And I think that's one of the main things with hiring right now. It's like, if you're able to create a lot of time for the GMs to really work on those relationships and building like really those connections with those employees, not only will you get referrals from those employees for new people who are highly qualified or good to work for your business, but those people are a lot more likely to stay around, especially if they're enjoying what they're doing. And I know from experience that I was happy taking less pay doing my previous job because I enjoyed the people that I worked with and the culture that was created. So if you're able to create a culture and an environment where people feel like they can grow and they can be, I don't know, included and feel like going to work every day is a pleasure, I think hiring and everything else will just kind of come into turn with that.
Yeah, and Darren, it
Thanks.
doesn't just take into effect the retention or the hiring. It's, you know, that type of stuff, that follow-up training, and what Jason was saying about the just training. I mean, that type of stuff affects the entire organization. And I think one of the most incredible stats in terms of that I ever saw was, I mean, not to name names, but this massive coffee company that I'm sure we've all been to, there was a study done on them in the US a few years ago, and 90% of their staff that were polled across the whole country voted yes to the question when they were asked, have you received follow-up training in the last year? 90% of their staff. So it's one thing to do the training. It's another thing to have the staff actually register it, that yes, I was trained. Yes, I was given support, you know, and I think there's direct correlation between not only retention and the fact that that company grows at an incredible rate.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a great point. Teresa, did you want to chat a little bit about your comment? You know, we need to level up the hospitality industry. What does level up look like to you, or what are your thoughts on that?
Hi, thank you so much. Appreciate you hosting this.
Oh, thanks for being here.
Absolutely. Level up is, we need to have it be where we are one cohesive industry. I've been a sommelier, I've been in retail sales in wine for 20 years. And even just restaurant to retail, I see such a disconnect, which is really unfortunate. I was at Joe Forte's yesterday, actually, and I was talking with a client of mine. I had taken her for lunch, and we were talking about the restaurant industry. And there's very few restaurants she goes to because she only goes to the restaurants where they have the consistency, where they have, you know, their level, and they have leveled up because that's where they started. Whether it's farm to table, whether it's sustainability. I remember years ago, a wine agent who was working at Chambar. He was actually a sommelier at Chambar. And this is almost 10 years ago, where we were doing, looking at sustainability for our shipments. So Cisco finally, instead of just driving and doing your deliveries to whatever restaurants and all of that, you actually coordinate. All of these things that I've just talked about, they don't exist in a model such as myself being a sommelier. I have to go through WSET, diploma, Master of Wine to achieve my credentials and experience. What I don't see in North America that I see around the world and everywhere else is this cohesion and this real respect for being a server, even for being a dishwasher or a busser. Our bussers and dishwashers are the most important. If they are not there, I can't do my job. I've washed and polished glasses in the middle of a wine weekend where people were paying thousands of dollars for this weekend in the remote wilderness. That is ludicrous. And this is where and why I say we need to have a North American certification where it says, this is our industry, these are our standards, and they should be the best in the world. Not that I have any opinions on it.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing. You said a few things there that I like. Now, I've done a lot of time in dish areas, and I know what it's like when you don't have those people available, and it is not fun.
No.
And I have lost phones and watches and other electronics because they've fallen out of my pocket while I'm trying to catch up and keep enough dishes. So we need to respect all those positions because they're all part of the team. They all provide a very important support to what we're there to do, which is serve our guests, right?
Yes.
And I do like, a collective, because I've said this before, the only way we're going to get through all these challenges is as a community. And as big as the hospitality service industry is, it's also really small, because when you go through your LinkedIn and you see somebody who's connected, well, I worked with them at that company, but I work with this guy at that company. How the hell do they know each other? We are a very connected business. So if we can find a way to be that community, I think we're really going to be able to do some of the stuff that you talked about, which is great. I know Jim and I, you were talking earlier a little bit about education, which Teresa kind of goes to what you were talking about, and how there needs to be more education, not only about the opportunities within our industry, because there are some great opportunities, but different ways to help people learn about our industry and what are the different things that you can do on it, and how can you make a life out of this in a career. I mean, I live in Minnesota. We are down to one hospitality school in a state that is focused very heavily on tourism. How does that make any sense? And they only get, in their 2-year program, their highest level is 100 students. It blows my mind. So I think there's some great opportunity there. Jim, any thoughts while I run down to the next questions?
Well, the education thing. I mean, I think there's a few reasons there, right? I mean, one is similar to what I believe her name is Teresa was saying, is the level of education that she would have had to have gotten to become a sommelier is. I mean, I've been through a good part of WSET, and it's intense, and I have a lot of appreciation for that. So good on you. But there's no, when was the last time you spoke to a restaurant manager who went to school to become a restaurant manager? At any level, almost, right, all the way up to C-suite, almost any level in our industry. When was the last time you spoke to a general manager of a restaurant who encouraged their people to go to school in order to pursue an education or a career in hospitality? I think there's multiple factors working against the education, the formal education when it comes to hospitality, because on one hand, nobody's ever gone to school unless you want to be a chef to get into hospitality. And on the other hand, nobody's encouraging those people to do it. Right. So right. Specifically from a front of house perspective, I find that almost everyone that I come across and have worked with over the years, myself included, became whatever I became in that industry by learning as I went and attaching myself to smart people and those types of things and having fun and not doing anything stupid. But it is an industry that it's very much learn as you go. And I think there's opportunity to, whether it's through formal education or through different types of programs, to help improve that in our industry, because there's a reason why people don't view it as a real job.
Right.
And we've all heard that.
Yeah, no, definitely. One of the things that I hear quite regularly, and I get what they're trying to say, but it just irks me. It's unskilled labor. I have had engineers and doctors walk out from behind the counter of a Tim Hortons restaurant in tears because they couldn't handle the pressure of working back there.
Yeah. So
there are different skills in our industry, but there are still skills, and it takes a certain type of person to be able to do this job. And so that's part of the thing that I really wanted to get into, as well as how do we change that? And it's through education. It's getting maybe into the schools earlier. I mean, when I was a kid growing up, you were doing pretty good if you got a job at like a McDonald's, right? Because they had a great training program. We even heard about it when I actually went to hospitality school. I went to Ryerson. What their training programs and the things they offered, the things that made them so good were things like that. When I was with Tim Hortons, we got a lot of great training. There's a lot of great support. We seem to be, because we're so tight right now, we just seem to be getting away from doing those types of things. And it's impacting us. And, you talked about it earlier, that whole, if we really paid attention to how much it was costing us to hire and train and replace somebody, we might focus more on doing the other things to reduce some of that. I mean, we've all heard about retention costs, but I don't know that we do a lot to look at that. And I mean, I know we used to use a number of $1,500 for a team member. That was a few years ago. It's probably a lot more than that now. But even at that, if you have 100% turnover and you've got 30 staff on your team, what's 30 times $1,500? What could you do with that money?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
it's very true. Yeah. And Anton just made a comment there about every teenager needs to go and work for a year in retail or food and beverage. I was going to say something along the same lines that, you know, those people, those engineers and doctors who say that it's, you know, the whole skilled labor thing, or they say that it's not a real job. The amazing thing that I always find is that they're the same people who look at application forms to see if you have restaurant experience, because it means you're resilient and you manage stress well.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Stress. Is there stress in our business?
Sometimes, maybe a little bit.
A little bit. Kind of like, I don't know if anybody saw that video the other night of the young lady throwing a stanchion over the counter at a McDonald's because she was upset with her order. There's no stress in our industry.
No.
All right. Yeah, Anton also shared that, you know, what if I train them and they leave? What if you don't and they stay? Right? What's that going to do to you? I mean, that's been around for a while, but it is so true.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, man, you've shared a few things. If you wouldn't mind unmuting yourself and kind of talking a little bit about some of the stuff you were thinking. And
good afternoon, everyone. I apologize ahead of time. I have some connection issues, so
no problem. I'm just admiring the electric drum set behind you.
oh, thanks. I'm a hospitality major. No pressure, right?
Yeah.
Well, speaking of a few points here and there, I'm also a hospitality major. I went to FIU, Florida International University. I have a double bachelor, restaurant, food and beverage, and hotels. So I started my way down as the first female busser for Outback Steakhouse, and I moved up as an executive a few years later. I'm not going to say my age. But I noticed one thing, when I was restaurants, I noticed that we sometimes as managers forget how we started and we start looking down at our employees. I do believe that if we treat everyone with us, they will feel more appreciated, especially after what happened through COVID, where everybody was let go, felt like they were, sorry for the word, like a dirty diaper, they're not important. And then now we want them back and they're not coming back because they either find a different job or they don't want to come back because they didn't feel important. And now I'm going to open a can of worms because I am pissed. So sorry, guys, I apologize. It's just the fact that you hear people on TV saying people don't want to come back to work. That is not true. People want to come back to work, but who wants to come back to a work where they don't feel appreciated? Nobody, none of us want to, you know,
Right.
Nobody. When I worked in the hotel industry, I was an exec as well, and I was a manager. I do know that the few hotels I worked for, they were offering a tuition reimbursement for people to go to hospitality school. I'm not sure how it is in some states, but I worked in Florida and I worked in Georgia, and it was the case on those two states. So if you bring something like that, it may attract more of our employees to stay and feel important, like I am getting paid, and also my manager values me and values my future, and they're paying me to go to school. It may not be much, but every little dollar helps. Right. Because you just giving back to these employees, and employees will stay with you even though you don't pay them much because they feel appreciated. And we see that everywhere, all over LinkedIn, and you hear it on the news. I worked in jobs where I wasn't paid and I became a manager afterward. Well, it took years, but it prevailed. So I do believe that, and I'm sorry, guys, I have so much to say, but I'm trying to make it short. Another thing about restaurant, which I think I shared with you, Darren, before, I feel like we throw in money at our employees. So just to come back, they give them bonuses. Oh, if you work here, you get 6 months or $600, but it's an installment. Stop bribing people. They are important. Make them partners. I mean, someone will come back to work if they know that at the end of the quarter, they're going to get a bonus or like a percentage of the revenues. Do you mean to tell me if someone, okay, paying everybody minimum wage, I know it's hard on some restaurant, but if they offer them, I don't know, a bonus, something. We offer manager bonuses at the end of the quarters. Why don't we offer employees the same thing? I rest my piece.
Yep. Perfect, thanks. And I do know there are some restaurant groups out there that do offer. I've worked with some owners who have offered profit sharing in their restaurants for their teams and a few other things too, because let's face it, if it wasn't for them, you couldn't do that. Like you wouldn't have a business. We need these people as much and more than they need us. And I think, to your point, people forgetting where they came from, I can see some of that. Right? You've been in this business, you're now in the E-suite, you've been up there for the last 10, 15 years, and you maybe lost connection with what's going on at restaurant level. So it is really important to stay in touch and listen to and engage in what's going on in the restaurant. Walking into a restaurant and seeing the CEO washing dishes, I know the director of operations and the owner will probably have a coronary watching them do that, but from the team member's perspective, what does that tell them, right? So I think there's some opportunities there to really start building that we are an industry that cares. And this industry has done a lot of great things for the communities. I mean, you may remember at the beginning of this, it's like, that restaurant you asked for a prize for your silent auction. Well, now they need your help, right? We do want to be a part of the communities that we live in and work in. So it's creating that emotional relationship even more so, I think, is going to help us out as well. So, a whole bunch of things. Carmen, if you wanted to kind of share a little bit more about, you have to inspire staff to have personal integrity in their work. What were you meaning with that, and how would you inspire staff? And then Anton, I'm going to come to you because I see you got your hand up. Sorry, I just saw that.
Hey, it's really a delight to sit in on the conversation today and get everyone's perspectives. There's so many thoughts. I've had the privilege of being in the industry for over 20 years now. And what I mean by my comment is just this, that we forget when we are higher up, when we're managers or owners or directors or whatever, what it's like to be in the role of being a server. And if you take a moment to put yourself back into the position where you were when you were in your early 20s and putting yourself through school or trying to become an actor or a writer or any of the reasons that people get into service for, not because they love hospitality. I mean, we all stay in hospitality because you fall in love with it and you don't want to get away from it. But when I was younger and working, trying to put myself through school, and that's how I fell into hospitality, I went to work every day and tried to do a great job, not because my employer was there paying me, not because I was trying to get a tip, and not because I was, trying to make dollars. It all came down to, you do a good job for yourself as an individual. And if when you're training your staff, and I really do appreciate everyone's comments about training, because I 100% agree. But if you can train your staff and help build culture where you admire and recommend and support personal integrity in your staff, which means they come into work and they do a good job because they believe in doing a good job for themselves, because they want to represent who they are in the world, even to the smallest task, whether it's clearing a table or saying goodbye and smiling at someone, that you do a good job for yourself. And when it comes down on how you inspire that, it comes down to that training and that culture piece, that you need to create an environment where everybody stands together, and from the owner right down to whatever the most part-time, lowest paying position is, that everybody is appreciated for the time and attention they put into the work that they do. And I agree with everybody that's made statements about better pay and better support and more bonuses and more fairness. I think I can't even get into that side of things because I feel like our industry is very unbalanced compared to other industries in the world. But I will say that, pay aside, if you can create a culture in your business where you are inspiring your people to do a good job for themselves at the end of the day and not for anybody else. That has a big piece in creating a restaurant where everyone is happy to be there and keeps coming back to work.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I experienced that a little bit today, and I think anybody who's been to a Chick-fil-A, whatever you think of them, but when you go in there, they are kind of the gold standard when it comes to service, and their staff seems genuinely happy. Right? You know, I'm hearing them, my pleasure. They're smiling, they're asking, and that's not easy to do. So if they were being treated poorly and not respected, I don't think they'd be doing that. And when I go in there, there's the owner, Andrew, behind the counter, working with his team. So they see him regularly. So it, you know, it says a lot when they can have, you know, they're doing better on staffing. They're still struggling. I've talked to some of their owners, they're still struggling a bit, but they're doing better than most and still maintaining, in my market, an AUV of $5.3 million. We're open 6 days a week. Something's got to be said for that, right? So why are we all trying to do that?
Well, there is a direct correlation, right, Darren, between culture and, and sales, right, and business success. Yep. I mean, I read an article yesterday that was talking about how Chick-fil-A does, I think it was 40% more the average Chick-fil-A than the average McDonald's in revenue. And like you said, they're only open 6 days a week.
Yeah.
So they're busier for lots of different, I mean, their food is good too, but you know, you got to think about the other things that go into that. Definitely. So I think Carmen's comments were great too.
Good. Awesome. Thank you, Carmen. A lot of other good comments here. I did watch something just before earlier today. Danny Meyer from New York, Shake Shack and Union Hospitality was talking about the difference between service and hospitality and how we need to be focusing a little bit more on that. I don't know if anybody else saw that, but it's, you know, service is, I ordered my steak medium rare. I got my steak medium rare. You've provided me service. But have you created that emotional connection through a hospitable interaction with me, that memory of why I think your restaurant's great and I want to come back? And I think we need to do more of that. I mean, I got to be careful how I say make an emotional connection with your team, but we need to do a little bit of that so that we feel connected. You feel more of that team, right? And I think we've probably all been on one of those. I know I was on, I've got some old team members from my Tim Hortons day on here right now, and you know, we worked hard, but you know, people had your back. There was respect, there was support, and you know, that makes a big difference. Anton, you had your hand up. If you want to share your thought with us, sir.
Yeah, just kind of going back to what Eamon said and Teresa mirrored. When I managed the restaurant, when I grew up from a dishwasher and, you know, went through the steps and ended up being a manager, I really never asked any of the staff members to do anything that I wouldn't do myself. So be it, you know, cleaning the bathroom, washing the dishes, doing the inventory. And that was kind of one of the advices that I was given that really helped to build that connection that you were talking about. And as a manager, after after people see you do that a few times, they're a lot more, what's the word? Better at responding for the asks as well, too. You create that give and take situation. When they see you washing dishes at midnight on Saturday, knowing that you've been there since 6 a.m, it's, you know, it definitely helps them to give a little more as well.
Yeah, I agree 100%. It builds that level of respect because they see you there willing to work side by side with them. Right. So perfect. I like, I mean, just shared the Maya Angelou quote. I've learned that people will forget what you said, forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. Right. And that is so true. I actually got to meet her many years ago. She stayed at the hotel I was working at. It was pretty cool. All right, guys, we've got 10 minutes left here. We've talked about a lot of different things. Does anybody have any question they'd like to ask? Is there something that you're struggling with in your business that you would like some feedback on? What is your biggest challenge? Is the recruiting the biggest challenge? Is culture the biggest challenge? Do we need to do more of, because it's really easy to say, I've got no staff, recruiting is my biggest challenge. But have you really done the root cause analysis to see why? Why is staffing so difficult for you? Maybe it's just the area you're in, and it's a challenged area, but maybe there's other things we need to look at. So, I'd love to hear if anyone has any questions specifically about that, or some stories to share where they've actually done well with it and been able to find some people and are building that culture. I can share lots of stories, and I like to talk, but I'd love to hear something from the group if anybody has anything. While you guys are thinking about your favorite story, I'll share a little bit about some owners that I worked with in Manitoba who would spend, every year there was a competition, and they ran great restaurants. Their numbers were great. Their staff did a great job. Their restaurants were clean. They did everything the way they were supposed to. And because of that, they ended up in these finals for the best restaurants in the market. And the top prize for that was $10,000. They would spend $10,000 doing additional cleaning, line painting, replacing tiles, all that kind of stuff. And then when they won the $10,000, which they did several times, gave it all to their team, because they knew that they wouldn't have been there in the first place if that team didn't do everything they did. And these are the things that we seem to get so caught up sometimes in everything that we're doing, and forgetting that, if we don't have them, we don't have our business. We think we're there for our staff sometimes, and as opposed to they're there for us, as opposed to us being there for them. So, definitely need to look at that a little bit. Jim, any final thoughts you want to share? Any other ideas as we start coming towards the end here?
Well, just in the spirit of sharing that, just a quick story, like you were just saying, one that you and I were actually speaking about this earlier today too, but I think it's an interesting one to share with the group, because, earlier we were talking about how the state of our industry currently is forcing operators and owners to make decisions in ways they maybe never would have before. And some of that's based on urgency or, I don't know what to do type scenario, right? Hair on fire type thing. But, I told you a story earlier today, and I'll tell it to the group now, about the operator who was having such a hard time finding people that he wanted to just find a way to dramatically raise his wages so that he could try to attract people. And the only way that he figured that he could do that was by raising his prices dramatically as well. And, this is like a $25 hamburger one-off restaurant, type place, 100 seats, not a big dynamic business. And his approach was that he was going to raise his menu prices by 15% in order to try to combat the rise in what he thought he needed to add to wages. And it's ended up actually becoming a really scary scenario for him, because what he's actually running into now is that he doesn't have staff, and he also doesn't have customers. Right. Because, he's upset his customer base, he's charging too much, and it's going to cost him so much more in marketing and apologies and whatever else it might be to get his business to come back. So, there is a big heavy component, I think, to the education side of how to go about this, how to get through this hurdle or get over this hurdle in a responsible way, because it can be scary for operators if that's what they're running into.
Yeah, oh, definitely. We are so reactive, and some of it's also come down to the fact that we didn't start planning until we started seeing things reopen, and now we're scrambling. And the guys that did are ahead, right? So always be planning, and always be looking for those new opportunities. So, guys, we're coming towards the end here. I want to, unless there's another question or anybody else that would like to share, I'm just going to put my contact information in the chat session. If you have a topic that you'd like to share with Great Minds Sessions, or if you'd like to be on a panel going forward in the future, please feel free to reach out. I'm always looking for topics that are important to this industry. I think getting us, as it was brought up earlier, this community together to talk about what's going on and how we collectively can support each other through it and make change is important. I appreciate everybody's time this evening and sharing their ideas and thoughts. Jim, I want to thank you very much for taking the time out. I know you're busy and spending some time with us this evening and sharing your experience and your knowledge with us. So thank you very much for doing that, sir.
Thanks so much.
Oh, my pleasure. All right, guys, with that, I'm going to say thank you to you all. I'm going to let you be on your way. The next Great Mind session is going to be on September the 6th. These keep popping up right after long weekends in Canada. I apologize for that, but they are the first Tuesday of every month. So we'll see you on September 6th. And again, everybody, thank you very much. All the best out there. I wish you most success in your restaurants and your businesses. And if there's anything that we can do to help, please feel free to reach out to me. That's what I'm here for. All right, guys.
Thanks,
Have a
Darren.
great night. Take care. Thank you.